Okay. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of Lawyers on the Rocks. The Lawyers on the Rocks are Jeremy Elder, Jimmy Kurt Nachman, and Adam Crandall. We are produced by the award-winning Gideon at Up Next Creative. We have a number of great topics. We are joined by Robbie Leonard. And you can find us online at lawyersontheRocks.com, Facebook, Instagram, email us at lawyersontheRocks@gmail.com. Whatever it is you do, please be sure to leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, Stitcher, or anywhere you get your podcasts. In the meantime, sit back, relax, pour yourself a drink, and enjoy this episode of Lawyers on the Rocks.
We have to start with the most important topic, which is this was the first annual Maryland Podcast Awards, and we won 2 of the 5. There was heavy competition against 4 to 5 other podcasts, and we won Best Produced, which now we realize may not have been a spelling error, but a play on words, which we love, and Best Interview. I don't know whether we deserve the second one, but Gideon, this is our time to say thank you. When you're alive, when you're dead, when you've been reincarnated on the show, you've had COVID 19 times, 14 exposures, you have a great batting average. We appreciate all the work you do. We got Best Produced Podcast. So thank you very much for all your hard work, buddy.
You know, it's funny. I felt the other way around. I was like, some of these other podcasts are probably really well produced, but I don't think they probably hold a candle to our interviews, which have been excellent.
I was thinking we actually won an award for our blooper reels because I think we have the best produced blooper reel out of any local drinking, not sober lawyer podcast.
Of which there are 40.
There was definitely a lot of competition. I watched that little award show, and everybody's just drinking on their podcast nowadays. Whatever they're talking about, it's like drunk football, drinking women. What's going on?
Here's what's unfair.
And Robbie, the one that I voted for the most was because you vote early and you vote often, right? Yeah. Is the My Jewish Grandparents Drinking Podcast?
Oh no, my voting as a Jew was quite anti-Semitic apparently then, because I voted, and this is why Robbie being on today is funny, is because he knows both Tom Cole and Candace Dotson-Reed who have Elevate. So the funny thing about them is that is hard-hitting interviews. They have every gubernatorial candidate on, every mayoral candidate on. I mean, we talk politics here, but we do it a little bit in jest.
Who won the best podcast?
They should. I mean, look, I'll put it out there. I love our fucking podcast, but the fact that Elevate didn't win. And
who won?
It was like Harford County Living.
It was
something.
Harford County Living.
You
knew that. You knew it was Harford County
the ballot
Living.
box.
The story that's not in here.
I'm going to sling some arrows at him.
No, let's be real. The story that's not in here that sums up why we won is the prom girl that's being charged as an adult for rigging the election. This was a popularity contest, and I put on there, if I've represented your ass pro bono, you better be voting. And look what happened. All of my pro bono clients climbed in on Facebook, including Robbie, who voted 14 times. And obviously we won. So I'd like to thank everyone. I'm going to put that award up on my wall like all the other top 10 trial lawyers, because you're a top 5 trial lawyer in America.
I think I am.
That's what the advertisements say for $395.
That's true. I got the plaque.
To all of our listeners, thank you for voting. And this time around, if you need any pro bono work, call Adam. He's down to represent your deported loved one.
I'm really happy that, first of all, that Gideon is here with us today.
In person.
In person. We don't have the space or there he is. First of all, I'm happy that Gideon's here. I'm also happy for the clarification on Best Produced Podcast, because I thought that just meant we had the most fruits and vegetables on our show.
That is what you would think. We've never done live at a farmer's market, but post-COVID.
And then you handed me this drink today that has, I think, more actual produce in it than alcohol. So it's the best produced.
And I didn't pour it, but
no dad jokes.
When I drink them, it's just like all gin. So, but that's like produce too, right? I think.
I mean, it's juniper berries. Yeah, they're all fruits and vegetables when you get down to the root of it, right?
That's right.
So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you coming on. And you and I go back quite a few years, and our paths have crossed. I'm glad we didn't say our swords have crossed. Several
what kind of
times.
podcast is this?
This is about as clean as they come. And now we really have to differentiate ourselves from Jewish Mothers Podcast and Harford County Living. So we really have to go even further.
Well, there's no pressure, Jeremy, but what you're about to do right now is interview Robbie Leonard, and we are the best interview podcast in America. So no pressure.
Yeah, you're lucky that I don't suffer from performance anxiety, so let's just get this thing moving. I'd like you to keep looking me right in the eye as we're talking.
Is it Cialis?
I'm already too pumped up as it is. So, Robbie, tell us a little bit
I
about
apologize,
yourself.
Mom. You know, I told my mom to watch this.
You could have
You
started.
should not have done that.
You literally just started the interview by telling me, "Hey, Jeremy, I know I answered the phone, but I didn't tell you you're on Bluetooth." While my kids are in the car and I'm talking about dicks. So thanks, Robbie. I'm sorry, Mom Leonard, Dad Leonard, Grandpa Leonard, Grandma Leonard. I hope we don't offend you today or ruin Robbie's life worse than he's already done himself. So you and I go back to your days as a public defender and my days as a state's attorney. And, you know, I think that's a sort of a nice place to start because obviously you come quite a far way, both politically and professionally. But I want to go back to those days a little bit because frankly, those were mine as a lawyer. So can you start with that? Like, why did you become a lawyer? Why did you join the public defender's office? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, let me tell you about how I became a lawyer. That was funny. I never met a lawyer. I didn't know if I knew any lawyers when I grew up. I didn't have lawyers in my family. My classmates, I didn't know if their parents were lawyers. But I was at Towson University. I was in my last semester, and my best friend at school, you know, and I were just chatting. It's like, oh my God, we're about to graduate. I'm like, what are you gonna do? He's like, I'm gonna apply to law school. And I'm like, me too. That sounds cool.
That was quite the commitment to follow there. It's not like I'm going to the Peace Corps, joining the Navy.
I had no idea. You know, I was a political science major. I did some internships. And I think any political scientist out there, have you ever met a political scientist? See,
Yes.
you have. Come on, man.
I was also a political science major, and I tell people I have a bachelor in science.
See, you're a political
Under
scientist.
Trump, everything's science.
I just wear like my lab coat and all that. Yeah, so I'm like, there's nothing there, so I'm going to apply to law school. So I did that and got into University of Baltimore, best school in Baltimore.
Agreed.
And then from there, you know, I kind of was toying around with doing environmental law. That was kind of my idea when I was applying to law school. Like, this is what I think I want to do. And then once I got in there, if anybody who went to University of Baltimore and you studied under Byron Warnken, you either loved him or you hated him. And I just loved his personality.
I actually don't know. Everyone will say he was a very tough professor to have. I don't know anyone that hated him because he found a way to make you love him. I was the student that didn't study enough but got to drink and smoke cigars with him.
I will say there was one former colleague of yours at the state's attorney's office who was a classmate of mine, and she was sitting in the front row right in front of Byron Warnken, front and center, and she brought a bag of like big, hard, like sourdough pretzels and like a jar of mustard to class. And Byron Warnken's trying to, you know, talk about criminal procedure 2. And she's like, and he's like, I don't want to say her name. Molly, shut the fuck up.
Are you serious?
I thought you were going to say Maryland.
So I'll say,
She was still taking the bar exam.
Molly probably hated Byron Warnken, but I loved him. So that's why I say you either loved him or hated him, you know?
That's better than the story I have. And I know Adam had the luxury of going to the second best law school in Baltimore, so he didn't know. But Byron was a little man with a big voice and a giant brain. And so because you and I are the same, well, actually the three of us, you, me, and Kurt, were all there around the same time. We obviously headed for the state's attorney's office. Kurt's there as a law clerk. I'm there shortly after.
Do you want to look at our live feed right now? It's Gideon's ugly mug. I think the audio is still working correctly, but our video feed, and we still have, you know,
I'm glad we run
guys,
best
produced.
Best
There it
produced.
is.
This
Best
just proves
produced.
my theory that the best produced is fruits and vegetables.
Yeah, you're not helping. You're also dressed like a vegetarian, but it's fine. We'll get there. So why did you go to the? Why did you
Still
go to the public
animosity all
defender's
day
office?
today.
I don't even understand that reference.
It's the no socks. You just always you're always dressed like you're going to the farmer's market.
I can't even see you in that jacket.
It's on purpose. Okay, as I fit
Guys,
in here.
the live feed is actually working right now. What you're witnessing is Jeremy's camouflage. You
It's all
can't see
black.
him.
I'm looking at it now. The live feed is black, but we're having a very entertaining conversation. That's what's really important.
Jeremy's
To the
camera.
Gideon's
listeners.
going to edit a lot of this out for next week's, not so live version.
People watching at home think
Hey,
that
we're
the lawyers
back.
on the rocks now are Kurt, Adam, and Robbie because they can't see you, Jeremy.
I don't mind going into hiding. A little bit of camouflage is important in nature. And given who I represent, hiding may be a good thing for me. So getting back to you, why did you, Robbie, navigate towards the Office of the Public Defender, representing the indigent and the people who need, which I call it God's work without making any light of it, because I know what that work is now being in the private bar. Frankly, I didn't understand at the time being a state's attorney, but what led you there as opposed to the state's attorney's office, which is pretty much where the lion's share of UB was split between?
I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but like the way that I always thought of it, the difference between the prosecutors and defense attorneys or public defenders is, you know, a lot of the people that I would talk to, friends of mine growing up, they'd find out that I was working at the public defender's office, and they're like, how can you defend those people? You know, look, I've represented some bad people, right? And I've represented some people who are having just a bad day. I've represented most of the time, there were people who were just having addiction, right? And our criminal justice system just wraps up too many people who have drug problems. But what I thought the difference between the state's attorney and public defender, and we all had to work together in the justice system, right? Everybody's got a job to do.
That's how we met.
And I would say, like, look, if everybody does their job right, then the bad guy's going to go to jail, right? And the person who's not guilty should be found not guilty. If everything works out perfectly fine. And if let's say I get a bad guy off and he should be in jail, but I let him out, I'd feel better about that than if I was a prosecutor and I sent away somebody who shouldn't be there.
I prosecuted a case that shouldn't have been prosecuted.
Yeah.
Right. That's the point.
Right. Like sending somebody to jail who you know is not guilty. Right. And they're going to just sit in jail for years. I couldn't live myself doing that. I felt like, hey, if somebody is let off, if the charges are dropped, if somebody's found not guilty and they were guilty, then I'm going to make the prosecutor and the police do a better job next time, right? They're going to get their ducks in a row. They know that when they come to court, I'm going to be prepared, and they got to be prepared. So next time, the guy will go to jail.
So let me say this about district court, because Kurt and I spent about a third of our career there before leaving, which is, or if you ask me, 2 years of my 15-year illustrious prosecutorial career. But when you're there,
third,
it's like 18%. So your job in district court, though, if you have a wonderful relationship with the public defender, because a lot of you are young and right out of law school, and this is one of the reasons, frankly, I always liked you and Natalie Finnegar next door when she was running Northwest Public Defenders, with a lot more experience sort of running it with Kurt. But when you have a good relationship with a prosecutor and a defense attorney, a lot of those mistakes don't get made because, frankly, the cases either work out in pleas for those individuals that maybe need to face consequences, whether it's jail, probation, or a fine, and then the cases get dismissed before you have to have a trial. And now I feel like, even though we're both a little far removed from that, from those respective roles, I feel like in Baltimore City specifically, that's not at all what's happening. Now we've gone to a version of where, you know what, as a state attorney, I'm just going to put my case on and try it. And I don't really care. I don't want to talk to your witnesses. I don't want to hear what's going on. And there are definitely exceptions to it. Essentially, the prosecutors who were there when I was there. But a lot of the young prosecutors in various jurisdictions, the city, the county, now just have a different mentality where it's this more of a gladiator mentality of, well, I'm just going to put it on. And that's why I asked you that question going backwards, was that we avoided a lot of trials because we didn't need to feel like, oh, I have to have a trial on this. We weren't hunting trials, so to speak, because you're going to get your trials one way or another. But to go to what you said, when you have two people, you're not on the same team, but you recognize, I call it practical wisdom. You're able to sort of understand each other's point of view and then make a good decision with respect to your other side to get the proper outcome. And I don't see that as much. And maybe I'm just glorifying when we were there.
I don't know. I mean, I remember back in the day, a couple prosecutors that
Kurt,
we're just extremely competitive and felt like they had to win, like they needed their conviction. And especially when I went to juvenile. So the public defender's office, at least in Baltimore, you're either on the adult path or juvenile path. And with the prosecutors, you go through both, right? You go through juvenile and then you go to felony after that, right? Or misdemeanor jury trial, circuit court.
Yeah.
But I had the luxury. I was only one of a couple who did both. And what I loved about juvenile was I went to trial all the time. I felt like there was no downside possible. A juvenile, there's no maximum criminal penalty. It's all the same.
And for listeners, there's no jury. It's a judge trial.
Yep.
Right. So, and you're already in juvenile. The penalties are juvenile. The worst that can happen to you is you can be detained as a juvenile until the age of 21.
Right. So if I plead my client guilty to anything, I felt like it was the same thing as if I went to trial and was found guilty of the worst thing. Like the penalty is going to be the same. Right. So I tried cases all the time. And so, the prosecutors there would know that, and they'd walk in and be like, oh man, what's your defense? Like, what are you going to do in this case? And I'm like, I'm not telling you because you're going to try to fix it. Like if there's something wrong and if I talk to a reasonable prosecutor and I'd say, this is what's wrong with your case, you should throw it out. Right.
Right.
But there would be some prosecutors who'd say, well, let me go talk to the police officer and fix that.
So this is actually where I want to shift your gears a little bit in sense that, people know that, you and I both are pretty involved with the Maryland Democratic Party, you being in Baltimore County, me being in Howard County. One of the things I want to ask you is I often find that my experience as a former prosecutor and current defense attorney shapes my thinking about legislation and policy. I know you've run before. How do you think that experience as a former public defender, and I know you did some plaintiffs work, which we can talk about as well, shifted not only your perspective on the justice system, but I have to imagine was part of your inspiration for running for office?
Yeah, so I did politics before law. Okay, so here's a
because you're a scientist.
Because I was a scientist. I had my goggles on. I had a hypothesis. I had to test it out, and I managed a couple campaigns in Baltimore in 2006. Steve Fogelman ran against Pat Jessamy.
Yes, I remember.
So I managed.
He was her
his
challenger
campaign.
prior to Greg Bernstein.
That's correct. So we had that pickle jar, and we were trying to loosen the lid of that pickle jar, and Greg Bernstein walked over there and twisted the whole thing off.
Greg would say you won the election for him.
We did that. We planted the seed to see that it could be done. No, so I managed his campaign, and then next year I managed a campaign for city council, and then I became a lawyer. I passed the bar, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing now. I'm a lawyer. So a few years at the public defender's office, and then the public defender's office asked me to join their government affairs team. Then I was down in Annapolis testifying every day on all the bills in front of the Maryland Judiciary, the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. And now I'm on the other side from the prosecutors. So every bill, I'd be testifying all day. It's kind of like when you're a prosecutor or a public defender, when you're in court and you've got a million cases. It's just like that in Annapolis where, every single bill, I have something to say about it, right? So I'm testifying on all the bills. And, I'd be on the other side of Greg Bernstein. I'd be on the other side of Scott Schellenberger on every single bill. So we're battling every day. And that kind of got me back into Democratic politics it's not just party, Democrats and Republicans, but there's different kinds of Democrats within the Democratic Party. There's different kinds of Republicans within the Republican Party. And I had, my Tea Party Republicans I got along with. We talked about the Constitution. We talked about the Fourth Amendment. We talked about these things. Those were my guys. And then I had my progressive Democrats and who were fighting for, criminal justice reform way before it was cool. And, we had to fast forward like over 10 years to pass some bills this year. But that
you start realizing your Fourth Amendment perspectives may not be that much different than people sitting across the aisle from you.
People might not want to hear, but like when we talk about criminal justice reform on the national level, like one of the leading people is Rand Paul, right? And so you see Rand Paul and Cory Booker working together on criminal justice reform, throw in Kim Kardashian in there. It's a crazy party.
Who's taking the bar as we speak. So we might get her bar results by the next time we have you on.
Hey, if she sees that you guys won these awards for podcasts, she might be here next week.
The problem is she's going to want to Photoshop all of us, and I just don't know. I mean, Adobe Photoshop may not be the worst thing for all of us.
Yeah, so
all of a sudden Adam has long hair, flowing.
That's what he's missing.
So that's how I got back into politics. Is that I decided. I tried to lobby certain things, persuade people a certain way. And I said, I need to get involved in the Democratic Party and try to make it become what I believe the Democratic Party should be.
Do you find it difficult when you're in Annapolis whether it was lobbying on behalf of the Office of the Public Defender or even your involvement now as the Secretary of the Democratic Party, that because you have been in the trenches, because you've been in and out of jails, places of confinement, you've been in courtrooms.
And when Jeremy said that, he means as an attorney. I haven't spent prison time per
well,
se.
no, I mean, he's still registering, but
I've expunged
you
my
got
record.
out. Yeah, exactly. But do you find that, a JD is probably the most common last name in Annapolis? We have a lot of legislators, and it's not to their fault, but that went to law school but never really practiced. Do you ever find that there's an issue sort of communicating the real world mentality of, this is what I see in the jails, this is what I've seen with clients? We've talked about having Karen York on the show from Job Opportunities Task Force, who's someone that's doing amazing work with expungements and trying to do with unit expungements, we can get into another day. But I always sort of imagine it's difficult, even though you're talking to lawyers, that because they didn't practice, they may not understand the real world concepts that you're trying to explain to them, or, as I always say on the show, unintended consequences of bills.
Yeah, for sure. Even at the public defender's office, one of their when I joined the team, their main government relations person was an attorney, but he wasn't like a frontline public defender, right? So I was like his tag team partner, where he was more of the organizer and, talking to the legislators behind the scenes. I was the guy who was testifying, and I'd be the guy who says, like, well, this is how it affects my practice. In the real world, this is how it works. And I think that the legislators understood that and understood that I had real life experience, and they did respect that opinion. I think it's a common thing to think that like everybody in Annapolis are lawyers, but they're really not. I mean, there's not that many. There's really
feels
isn't.
like it. May feel like it.
It feels like it, but there isn't. And I don't want to say like
say there's probably only a dozen, right?
Oh, there's way more than that.
I don't know, man.
Way more than that.
I mean, I can rattle off like 6 or 7 off
the
top of my head.
Because you'd be surprised. There are a lot of JDs that don't have JD next to their name, but it has become, and we could pull the numbers, but it's become a little bit of a prerequisite to some degree that if you name most of the local officials in Baltimore City, for instance, that serve down there, Brooke Learman's an attorney, Lou Clippinger's an attorney, Ferguson's an attorney, Kurt Anderson's an attorney. Maryland's Maryland, right? And she's the state's attorney. But if you run through a lot of the electeds, Kraft is an attorney because he in Fells Point, and then he ran for judge. So you have a long history of a lot of attorneys sort of serving in that capacity. I don't think it's a knock. In my experience, I always like asking that question because I think there's always a little bit of a limitation in practicing versus non-practicing.
We could probably use more attorneys, and we could use attorneys who are really policy wonks. Like Brooke Learman is a policy wonk.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Like if when you look at, I think of Brooke Learman, people would say, I love Lori Charkoudian. I don't even know if she's an attorney, but there are just some people who just know how to craft policy.
I'm throwing Brooke a party. I have no problem saying out there. Yeah, she's amazing, but we need more people like that. And that you hit the nail on the head. You need a policy wonk as opposed to someone that's just like, oh, well, because I have a JD that I can understand what you're saying legally.
Look, let me tell you this. I think you get paid maybe $50,000. Let's just say $50,000 to be a legislator. If you're an attorney, you can make a lot of money not being a legislator.
Yeah, it's definitely a pay cut, obviously.
Right. And if you bill hourly for your time, all that time that you're spending in Annapolis is taking away from your time earning money. So you bring up Luke Clippinger. Well, Luke is a prosecutor, right? Mm-hmm. So he has a government salary, right? And so, and that's not a knock.
He's also the opposite of what we're talking about. He's someone who is in the trenches. He's prosecuting cases for many years. So he's really got his feet in it insofar as running JPR. Not that I agree with every decision that I know he's made, but he's a little bit different. I just like bringing this stuff up because I know that we have common misconceptions about just because you're a lawyer. Like we all get phone calls. Adam may get phone calls. Oh, you're a lawyer, so you know everything about divorces. And they just sort of, people think, as opposed to understanding like I'm a blue crayon, I color blue. People are like, no, you're a 32 color crayon box. And I think that's more the point.
Question that's sort of related to that. And let me just get your perspective on this. So is it similar to say, for example, how judges who typically don't have any trial experience get appointed to the district court or circuit court bench, and then the frustrations that flow from judges who are in district court and have never tried a district court case, or in circuit court and have never tried a jury trial and are trying to pick a jury.
Or bring it all the way home to Robbie, which is you left to go into private practice. You've now tried incredibly complex civil litigation, which you can weave into this, and getting in front of maybe a former prosecutor, someone like Amir Kurt, trying this $40 million, lead paint case.
If you guys have any $40 million cases and you need somebody to handle those, I didn't bring any business cards, but you know where to find me. I am that whole crayon box. I mean, so.
Thanks for bragging.
No, look, I'm a trial lawyer.
Jeremy, you're like an 8-pack of markers.
Look, you're a trial lawyer too, Jeremy.
Clarissa Ladd.
That's all.
I'm more
that's
like
all it is.
blunt wraps, okay? I know what the fuck I am. You need me. You don't want me, but you fucking need me.
Single wrap, blunt wrap.
Exactly.
Listen, Joe Biden's listening to this, and he's banning those blunt wraps.
He's gonna forget what happens by the end of this podcast. If Kamala's listening, I'm in trouble. Scared of her.
No, look. You don't undersell yourself. You're a trial lawyer, okay? I'm a trial lawyer. You're trial lawyers. You can figure it out, okay? If you can tell a story, if you can stand up in front of a group of people, that's what we're doing.
I think you just described a medical malpractice. If you're a surgeon, you're a surgeon, and we'll figure it out when we get inside of you. Don't worry. I like messing with you a little bit because there aren't a ton of lawyers, and I'm one of them. Like, I grew criminally. Kurt went into civil. A lot of lawyers don't sort of leave their bailiwick, and Adam's always done immigration. You're somebody, and I've always appreciated this about you, that you went to Peter T. Nicol and you really completely changed what you were doing and went from the defense and really ended up representing a lot of the same people.
Yes.
Right? That's the point.
Were you in my interview? Were you there when I was interviewed? Did you talk to Chuck from PR?
I would
HR
just suggest that
him?
you turn your Alexa down at home because my wife works for AWS. I'll just leave it at that.
You don't get to be the best interview podcast in the universe without doing a little research before interviewing.
You guys have Google? Do you guys have Google here?
Zero research.
Not even Google is named Herb Smith. In case you're listening right now, but you have some friends that are mutual to me that gave me a little bit of background on you, and I think that's fair. Plus, I've known you for almost 20 years.
No, so look, when I went from being a public defender to going into private practice and just going into civil law, I went from criminal to civil. I wasn't looking to leave. Like my friends from the public defender's office, they thought that like if you looked up public defender in the dictionary, like my picture would come up, right? Like I was the guy in Annapolis. I was the face of the Maryland public defender's office. And I loved being a public defender. I mean, I cared. I never got tired. Like people never wanted to do jail visits. I'm like, I'll go to jail every day. I love to see my people. And I had an opportunity. Here's the quick story of how it happened. I'm doing a bail review one day, and a guy who worked for Steve Snyder, an attorney, walks into the jail and he sees me. He's like, Robbie, I'm a mentor of this high school kid that is locked up for a robbery and he didn't do it, but I need to get him out and I don't know anything about criminal law. And can you help me? So I ended up getting him out of jail, ended up getting his case dismissed at the preliminary hearing. And he's like, I am going to repay you any way possible. I'm like, you don't need to, like, this is what I do. I enjoy it, right? And he ends up, like, calling his friend who's a recruiter. She's like, hey, I heard you're looking for a new job. I'm like, no, I'm not. And she's like, all right, well, so-and-so says, I need to find you a job somewhere. And so she started looking for work for me. And she found Peter T. Nicol's office, had an opening. And I told her, I said, look, I'll go for interviews, but I'm not looking, and I'll talk to people and see what's going on. And when I learned about lead poisoning, and I kind of had an idea about it just from my clients at the public defender's office who told me like, hey, I got lead. And I never really understood what that meant. But then I found out it's like the same exact clientele.
It is the same.
It's the same clientele. And I found out that big firm, like civil practices, they didn't have that connection that I felt that I had from being a public defender. I'm like, these are my people. Like, these are the same people that I'm with all day, every day, and I can represent them in the civil capacity. So I took the leap and did it. I had no civil experience. I had never done a deposition before, never answered interrogatories. And what I found out is that, and this is what surprises everybody, criminal work is harder than civil work. And the reason why that is because in criminal, the first time you know what the other side is going to say is during the trial, right? So like in a criminal case, you have a trial. I'd see the police officer. Hey, can I talk to you in the hallway in a minute? I'd be like, no, I'll talk to you on the witness stand.
Yeah, it's trial by ambush,
right? And so I'm like, well,
and
shit, like, I don't know what you're gonna say if I ask you these questions. But in civil, you have a whole practice, right, of having a deposition and asking all the questions and finding out what they're going to say. So when you have the trial, you already know what they're going to say. And if they say something different, you just pull out the transcript and you're like, wait, hold on. Remember when I asked you this before and you said the opposite of this? So are you lying now or lying then? Right. And so it's so much easier.
Do you remember Byron saying criminal lawyers try the cases they don't prepare and civil lawyers prepare the cases they don't try? That always stuck with me. That always stuck with me. And I find it to be 100%. It's maddening for me because for me, the easy part is trial, right?
Yeah.
Like the hard part is like all the...
It's why I didn't become a civil lawyer.
bullshit.
He made civil sound boring. If he would have said, but you get paid a lot more money, I would have learned how to do car accidents back in 2003.
So, but that's a reason why look, civil lawyers have a lot less trial experience than criminal lawyers do. Okay. I mean, being able to say I've tried hundreds of cases, as a criminal lawyer, like, yes, I have. And there aren't many civil lawyers who can say they've tried 10 jury trials, right? Especially like in lead paint where cases are worth millions of dollars. There weren't that many people who had tried as many cases as I did. So it was easy for me to transition. The hard part is just standing up and feeling comfortable talking to a judge, right? So many civil lawyers are just afraid once they get in that well and they're talking out loud, right? And you're not just in an office with, your tie off in a deposition. But once you figure that out and you feel comfortable talking to a judge, civil work's pretty easy. So it was an easy jump for me. And so that's why you can do it, man. You can do it all.
We're already there. We're already doing some civil. I mean, I'm not to make me the guest here, but I'll simply say I've done a little bit of civil. The interesting part to me is that you don't have to worry about being in front of the jury. To me, I would worry about all the nuances that you're not worried about, which is the process of discovery that now Kurt's doing. So interrogatories, all the stuff that sort of the unknown that you don't have. Adam, frankly, is more familiar in the immigration realm because it is so paper laden. But moving on from any of the paper stuff that no one wants to hear about. So you are the secretary of the Democratic Party currently. You are now started a law firm and joined your wife. She hasn't killed you yet. Is that a fair statement?
I'm still here. I'm looking at my phone and see. Yep, I'm still here.
So what I need to ask you before we sort of move on to some of these topics is, why in the fuck did you choose this drink and why is this important to you?
This drink? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. We rarely have the guest. Normally we say to the guest, what do you want? What can we get you? And they just sort of defer. You, on the other hand, gave us a drink and a recipe. So that's what I want to know.
Man, pandemic hit me hard, dude. I was home and I had to find a cocktail to make. I went to that liquor store and I'm like, are you guys doing great business? They said yes. So I Googled Limoncello Gin Collins and this is what I made. It was good. Dude, I joined my wife in her practice. This is her practice. Leonard McCliggett was McCliggett Law Group before I joined it. And she'd been doing it for 3 years before
What did you have to do to put your name first if you're comfortable?
It's alphabetical, man.
All I know is you crossed your legs and pulled your socks up. So
Dude,
I got
wait,
a
it's
little nervous
alphabetical?
there.
Nobody told me that.
Yeah. L.
It's not alphabetical. I don't know what Robbie
Welcome
Leonard
to
III
Crandall,
is telling
Eldridge, and
you.
Nachman.
Shit, man.
Interesting.
Why are you telling
I don't
lies?
mind that name change.
That's
Why are you
good to
telling
know.
lies here?
That's good to know.
That's how you got to
I
do
mean,
it.
you kind of are the sandwich between the Nachman and the Crandall. You're the cream.
You
the-
literally
the
just
creamy
called me
filling.
the taint. I'm the taint behind the two nuts.
You said that. I was gonna call you the Oreo in the middle.
None of you are helping right now. I wish I didn't invite Robbie on here. I thought we were aligned politically. At least I imagined we were, and I'm realizing that we're not right now.
No, we are, man.
Well,
I'm
I
with you.
appreciate you joining us. If you'd like to stay to discuss some of the stories, I think that would be pretty cool. We're probably not going to agree on anything from now on, and I'm definitely not voting for you for anything. But it's
Hey,
fine.
come on, man. Hey, I want to talk about Rudy Giuliani. That's why I'm here.
That's the
Definitely.
only reason you're here.
So, so we are sampling a Limoncello Gin Collins. It is just for the listeners. We'll get to the drink review at the end. Limoncello liqueur, gin, lemon juice, mint simple syrup, and club soda, and it's garnished with a lemon wheel. It's a very good summery drink, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But our top topic today is Rudy Giuliani's and this happened a couple weeks ago. These are some older show notes that I repurposed for today because I do that. I repurpose show notes when we don't use them.
But it's not old news.
It's not old
ongoing.
news. It's not old news. But I think what's fascinating here is so his search warrant was executed at the home and office of Rudolph W. Giuliani, who was at one point in charge and the United States attorney for the office that raided his apartment and his office. They seized his electronic devices, searched his apartment on Madison Avenue and his office on Park Avenue at 6 a.m., executing a search warrant. And this is kind of what I wanted to go to with Jeremy, maybe. Executing a search warrant is an extraordinary move for prosecutors to take against a lawyer, let alone a lawyer for a former president. It's a major turning point in the long-running investigation of Giuliani, who has steered New York through 9/11. In his early career, led the same U.S. Attorney's Office that is now investigating him. Giuliani's lawyer says it's unnecessary. He had offered to answer questions. I don't really know what that means, except those regarding privileged communications. Well, we all know that the Trump administration thinks that anything that was said anywhere is privileged. As a legal theory, that's just simply incorrect. So I guess what I wanted to ask here, Jeremy, is kind of like, what is the procedure to search a lawyer's office? Because we did have this happen in Baltimore recently. It's come up a couple times. And I think it's something that is sort of relevant towards all of our practices. God forbid the feds ever come knocking on our door.
Before we go there, though, I do want to point something out. I'm not sure. It's different if you're searching a lawyer's office to get at the lawyer's client. I don't think that's what's happening here.
Not at all.
I think they're going after Giuliani in
Agreed.
his personal capacity. So while that is an interesting question and certainly hits on some recent local lawyers being hit who represent politicians here, I don't think that's what's happening here.
My original question to this was what I would refer to as staleness, which is when you are applying for a search warrant, you have to provide sufficient information really to get at probable cause, which is there evidence of a crime or contraband either on the premises? So here, it's not that you can't find out about an age-old crime and then go hunting for it vis-a-vis a search warrant. I think my initial concern was that if this activity, which the article alleges, occurred back in 2019, when did these sources come forward? What were the grounds? Meaning, when you get a search warrant, there's an affidavit. What were the grounds for the search warrant? What information did they have? When did that information come to light? And then what was basically the cause for executing the search warrant now? I think the answer politically is easy, which is a change in presidencies. So Biden's administration looks at the same information and says, well, Trump may not have wanted to act on it, so we're going to act on it. The problem with anything that I just said as far as staleness, meaning is this information fresh, when should they have acted on it, is once a judge signs a search warrant, the judge is given great deference because of the law. So when you are ever challenging a search warrant for anything in Baltimore City and beyond, in state or federal court, and judges are analyzing whether there is sufficient probable cause in that affidavit, they are going to give respect to the judge that signed it. And so the first thing I thought of here is, okay, well, is this stuff old? Because they talk about Lev Parnas, they talk about Igor Fruman, they talk about all this 2019 stuff. I'm like, man, this stuff feels really old. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get a search warrant for it because it's not continuing criminal enterprise or a continuing criminal operation.
Well, I mean, don't you think that it could be a situation where they uncovered something that led them to something else, that led them to something else, which is what the feds do, and then they develop probable cause to search the apartment, to search the house, to look for, you know, fruits, evidence, and instrumentalities of whatever crime it is that they're looking into, that may still exist that they can't get otherwise.
Yeah, of course. Whenever you're
AKA,
looking at something,
you know,
2+
Rudy's cell
years
phone.
old, but when you've looked at lawyers being prosecuted locally, what we know about, for instance, the larger one right now in Baltimore City is that one of the former clients came forward, provided that information, and initiated that investigation over a period of time. So at least in that situation, frankly, because it's a little bit more public and some of the lawyers we know have been sucked into it, we know what initiated it and we know how timely and or recent some of that information was. Here, that's the only real question I have. Am I surprised by it? Not at all. It seems like easy pickings. The only question I have is I would love to read what the affidavit says, but as of this article, it's still sealed. You know, in state court, for instance, you can seal a warrant for just under 2 months. You can't go beyond that. In federal court, you do get a little bit longer, but at some point it's going to be unsealed. And then the public and or if there are charges will know what the affidavit said beyond this.
They found crimes there. They found things that we have no idea about. Like,
Like the secret Borat videos with Rudy Giuliani, the deleted Borat tapes.
Like, first of all, they were like, we're here to find the substance that was dripping down Rudy Giuliani's face.
Yeah, I mean,
okay?
he's just so stupid. You have to imagine it's like all sitting there like a fruit
it's
basket.
like one of the things that's most mind-boggling to me is like this is a person who has literally fallen from like the highest pinnacles of sort of stardom's not the right word, but like he was almost hero worshipped in New York, right? Rightfully or wrongfully.
Wrongfully.
You know, and across the United States, and then all of a sudden he over the last like decade he's kind of turned into this like bumbling, dripping like buffoon. I mean, who can't even?
Well, frankly, I think
words
we've
out.
realized he always was. He just wasn't exposed, and with a little bit of age and a little bit of time, it was very easy for him after 9/11 to just send the police out and be on TV and say we're going to stand up for America. That's a far cry from actually being, acting as someone's lawyer publicly and having to be analytical and intellectual and understand what the law is.
It's been longer than a decade. I mean, Rudy
It's
has
2001.
Rudy has been a noun, a verb in 9/11 for a long ass time now.
Yeah.
Look, this is the deal. Is that Donald Trump, and I don't make this like a partisan issue, but
go ahead. I do it all the fucking time.
He made it okay to be a criminal. I mean, he made it okay to, I don't even want to say bend the laws, but break the laws. And when you have somebody leading the government saying these things are okay, then that gives you permission to do it. I mean, that's the defense of all the insurrectionists, right? Donald Trump told me to do this, so I can do this. And that's where Rudy Giuliani and Michael Cohen and whoever else is that this is the president of the United States and he's telling me I can do these things. And then secondly, you don't just have someone saying that you can do it, but you can monetize it. And the way that our news media is with, Fox and now OAN and Newsmax, CNN, MSNBC, the crazier you can be, the more airtime you're going to get.
Yeah, I've told this story on the show before. I've done CNN and I've done Talking Head stuff before, and I was coached by the producer for the show, not producer Gideon, producer Gideon, to go after the other person.
Right.
Go after him. They didn't ask me back because I kind of like we were talking about some stuff related to the Freddie Gray case and some of the things that he said I didn't disagree with. And I just said, well, it's kind of not me. I'm not really I'm kind of a nice guy. Like if I agree with somebody, I'm going to agree with them. Like, and I was never asked back.
Yeah, so now you have
Should just been like, fuck you.
He was on Greta Von Susteren, so unless he was ready to put up the
Greta.
white power symbol, they put me against Van Jones, and I felt the same way. And I tried to argue with him, but it's Van Jones, and they just let the motherfucker talk. And then by the time it came back to me,
what side did you take against Van Jones?
Exactly. Like,
Jeremy,
you got a
come
white
on, man.
defense attorney on to talk about fucking Freddie Gray with Van Jones on the show. I'm like, somebody's sitting my ass.
I bet he cried though. He probably cried.
You know what? And I think this, what a good transition is from this story to Baltimore before we go to, I can't believe it's Baltimore, is because it's so new, and we're going to discuss this moving forward, is the FCC story with Marilyn Mosby.
Is that on here?
That's not on here.
Which is not on here, but I simply want to say to tease, because this is going to be an ongoing issue, which is when we talk about this new Trump playbook.
The Trump playbook.
Marilyn Mosby, by filing a complaint against the FCC for Fox 45 or Sinclair Broadcasting, playing 200 some odd stories, while BAL, Jay-Z, and some of the other locals did in the 30s and 40s for stories involving her administration.
80s, in the 80s.
Still about a quarter, about an 18%, like I said earlier. I'm great with numbers. That's why I went to law school.
So good at math.
But I bring that up to say this is where we've gone. And I think I can't name another Democrat that has done what she's doing, but it's right out of that playbook. And I expect to see every elected official,
I was going to say, if you're
this sort of
smart,
direction.
if you're smart, you steal a page from the playbook, because the playbook clearly works right side or left of the aisle, wherever you sit. You're in a culture where salacious behavior gains traction, and if your goal is just name recognition at the ballot box, that works.
Well, in the end, my point was I'm not so sure it does, because we have the Department of Justice hitting an apartment and a law office here, and we have the feds investigating Marilyn Mosby locally. So in the end, I guess we'll see. Time will tell if the playbook works, but it seems that sometimes getting yourself more notoriety in the media is great for you publicly, but it brings the attention of the Department of Justice, and that tends to be a lion that I don't want to climb in a cage with.
Yeah, but you talked earlier that why are they going after Rudy now? Is it stale? Yada, yada, yada. And then you said it's because there's a change of administration. People weren't thinking when Trump was president. They're like, hey, Trump, can I get pardoned? He's like, yeah, right? And then he was pardoning people. So,
yeah, but I thought
almost
there was some
preemptively.
I thought there was information that this investigation started under Bill Barr, and that there was I think it was, or maybe, am I confusing this with Matt Gaetz, the other fucking
Matt Gaetz.
Yeah.
Matt
Gaetz
Gaetz.
is in trouble right now. Yeah. Anyway,
So many investigations, so little time.
Well,
So many
the one comment
scummy
about
Republicans.
Barr that you do bring home, though, is that I think a lot of us were very, very quick to demonize Bill Barr. No, I'm not. I'm not actually defending him, but what I think I'm realizing as we're hearing about some of these other investigations is that there may not have been the active suppression that we thought. There definitely wasn't active prosecution. There definitely wasn't referral to DOJ. We didn't see the prosecution of it, but we're learning that some of the investigations may not have been stymied or just shoved under the rug and not done anything about. They just weren't talked about, and no one was charged. Two different things, not to give him any credit for it, but it is interesting that there was still some work, because Barr could have easily said, as the Attorney General of the United States, do not investigate that person. He can reach down to any U.S. attorney, as they're appointed by the president, and say, stop this, do this. I mean, I hate to go, Paul Giamatti's character in Billions, but they do have that power. So it is sort of interesting to me as these stories filter out that there was some suppression, but not complete suppression.
I refuse to applaud a prosecutor for not suppressing an investigation with a written confession to child sex trafficking. I'm not. Sorry, you don't get a fucking applause for not suppressing that investigation.
I'm more interested in understanding the history of it. That there looks like Barr wasn't completely following orders. Not that he was any sort of fucking anti-hero here, but that he wasn't completely following orders, because he just is painted a little differently in
Picturing
my
Bill
mind.
Barr wearing like a Wolverine costume right now, like the anti-hero.
Yeah, look,
he had a sliver of pride.
It's more like Jabba the Hutt.
That's what I think
Right.
I'm trying
No,
to say.
he
I
has
think,
a
I think
sliver.
Robbie's right.
I don't think it's pride. I think it is survival instinct, because he knew when this whole thing was over, he was still going to need to get paid from somebody. I don't think it's pride. I think the man saw the writing on the wall and said, How am I going to fucking rig?
Man, we got far afield on this topic.
Well, I can't believe it's not Baltimore. Happened in Baltimore. We brought it all the way back to Baltimore. So what's our next
Can't
story?
believe it's not Baltimore. Man appears on Zoom hearing on charges of driving a stolen car while driving another stolen car. A Chicago man who's accused of driving a stolen car last month dialed in for Zoom court appearance in the case while he was sitting behind the wheel of yet another stolen car on Tuesday, according to prosecutors. Are you telling me that when the police approached the defendant on Tuesday, he was in the middle of a Zoom court hearing? A flummoxed Judge David Navarro asked an assistant state's attorney after the hearing the allegations. Yes, Your Honor, that's correct. Back on March 8th, police arrested Joshua Slaughter after he was allegedly caught driving a stolen Dodge Charger in the Grand Crossing neighborhood. The Charger didn't have a front license plate. Its rear plate came back stolen out of Napierville, Illinois, according to CPD spokesperson. Slaughter gave cops conflicting information about the Charger's status and the license plate. Prosecutors charged him with misdemeanor trespass, possessing an unauthorized title or registration, blah, 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 blah. They released him on his own recog and ordered him to appear via Zoom March 30th. Slaughter did that, albeit while sitting behind the wheel of a stolen BMW X5, Jeremy.
It's always a Beamer.
It's always a Beamer. As the Zoom hearing proceeded, the police pulled up behind the BMW to investigate a report that it was stolen, according to the state. When cops walked up to the car, they realized Slaughter was in court at that very moment. Officers researched the BMW's registration, determined that it had been stolen from a dealership in Nashville. Police even called the car dealer to confirm the luxury car status. What, that it's a BMW? I don't even understand what that means. Cops seized the BMW and took Slaughter into custody. Prosecutors charged him with another misdemeanor count of criminal trespass to a vehicle. They told the judge that Slaughter had previously been convicted of a felon of possession of a firearm, CDS possession, and vehicular hijacking. Isn't that carjacking?
It is. But to fully appreciate this story, because Robbie was not on the last podcast. Our last, I can't believe this didn't happen in Baltimore, was another Zoom hearing with a domestic violence defendant who was sitting next to the victim, and then the judge and the
That shit's
prosecutor
awesome,
sent
by
the
the way.
cops
That's amazing.
to their house. So I love these stories about Zoom hearings and how, you know, all of us are lawyers here. We all prep our clients for hearings. I would never think to say to my client for a domestic violence case, don't sit next to the victim. I would never think to say to them,
No.
please don't drive another stolen car, or like, don't blow a line of coke off the fucking coffee table while you're on a Zoom hearing, or have sex with your secretary during the Zoom hearing.
That happened in Colombia.
Over the past year, have you guys had a lot of Zoom hearings?
You've had
Have
a ton.
I had a lot
You've
of
had a
Zoom
ton.
hearings?
I have not. I've had a few.
Both with and without pants on, yes.
See, I mean, I had a lot. Protective order hearings, peace order hearings, things like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like half of the people were in cars. And I just couldn't believe it. Like, and the judges, like, they never even said anything. You know?
They don't bat an eye at this
They
point.
didn't care.
They don't
And
bat an eye.
You know, the judges would just be like sitting in their seat and just like whatever. And I couldn't stand it, man. I could not stand the people who've.
So my new,
it was
like,
nuts.
whenever I know I have a Zoom case now, the things I tell my clients is like so far different. Like, used to be like, well, you don't need to go buy a suit, but if you've got a nice shirt, make sure you wear a button down, you know, no plunging necklines, nothing above the knee. Like, make sure you dress conservatively.
Plunging necklines.
That was a line I got from Natalie Finnegar, by
That's
the
a
way.
good one.
No,
Plunging
no
necklines.
open-toed shoes.
No open-toed shoes to certain associates.
In the office, I wear pumps, Manolos to court, and I wear open-toed heel sandals to the office.
That was Gideon, if you couldn't hear Gideon talking,
So-
by the way.
But seriously, like,
I love my
literally have
Manolos.
started practicing this speech. Like, okay, so if you're driving, you need to make sure you pull over and you're somewhere quiet,
All right,
where
hold on
there
a second.
aren't any kids in the background. And like,
Baltimore City Circuit Court put out an order that was sent to all of us. And the things that it included that you shouldn't do during a Zoom were so fucking unbelievable. No smoking during a Zoom call,
Wait,
which
whoa,
in
whoa,
Baltimore
why?
City says
Why?
they used to have, there are two courtrooms. They were on the 200 level in Courthouse East that used to still have spittoons in them. So it's like, I can spit my tobacco, right? But I can't
I
smoke.
think that's bullshit. You can't smoke.
Can't smoke, right? There was definitely one about using the bathroom, which is
Fine.
a story that none of us want to admit to, because there was definitely no conspiracy about flushing any toilets during any sort of phone calls in
Fine.
Baltimore City. That would never happen ever happen. Otherwise, it was like, make sure you have pants on, which is something that I
Why?
don't think is fair to say as long as I'm top up.
I think that's
professional.
bullshit. Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, but those rules, I never saw any other county ever put out a set of rules like Baltimore City did, and it's only because of what our clients do that we wouldn't think to tell them.
How about the guy that was rapping while he was in postponement court?
No, the best one, and then Robbie, because one of our favorite segments is always you get to tell your favorite story, and we can't let Robbie not do that. But my favorite Zoom call of all time during COVID was a regular phone call on Part 45, which is reception court, where all the felony cases go in Baltimore City. And the judge was running a couple minutes late, and somebody's client got on the phone and said, "Man, what the fuck? I'm on time. This motherfucking judge is late. Man, if I was late, she'd issue a fucking warrant for me. You know what? Someone should issue a warrant for that bitch." And I was like, you're not wrong, but that's not really how it works, right? So someone finally steps up as this guy's going on, and they're like, "Sir, you can just put your phone on me." "Nah, fuck this shit. You know how many judges issued warrants for me because I was fucking late? Nah, this motherfucker's late. I'm gonna say something." Judge comes out, Judge Handy, and she's just talking and talking and talking, trying to ignore the guy. "I want a warrant for you," and just keeps on going in. And I'm just sitting there like, man, he's going to keep on going. And to her credit, and if anyone knows Judge Handy, she doesn't take anyone's shit, man. Like if any judge doesn't take anyone's shit, it's her. And this guy just keeps on going in. "Man, you should get a warrant. You should get a warrant." Like fucking Oprah, "You get a warrant. You get a warrant." And then and eventually he ran out of steam and stopped talking. But that was my favorite because he was not wrong. When lawyers are late, we get in trouble. When clients are late, we get in trouble. But with Zoom court or phone calls, we're all having a little bit more fun and grace,
See,
I guess.
I haven't had any Zoom court because immigration court, the judges like still wear wigs and we write with quills. Like we're in that far in the past. But I've done a lot of Zoom consults, and my favorite, and I know this is like not exactly the same as the court stuff, but a dude like on the video call picked up while driving a FedEx truck, not like parked, like fucking driving that thing. And I was like, "Hey man, is this a good time?" Like you had an appointment. Like you want me to call you back? He's like, "No, it's good. Let's do this." And just fucking drove that truck while we talked about his immigration case.
I've talked to people
great.
naked in bed with their significant other in a domestic violence case. I mean, and I'm sure, Robbie, come on, you've got to have one. Like, have you not Google chatted? You're like looking really awkward at me, like I'm accusing you of something. I feel like maybe it's my clientele, maybe it's me that I just invite this upon myself. But I've had some very interesting.
I mean, the fact that you do
calls.
consults at 3:00 in the morning does engender certain behaviors.
I mean, when you're in Australia, you do what you have to do. Gotta plan it.
So we have. I want to do one more really quick story because we do have some graphics, and I think Gideon needs to test out this crazy fancy new. It's like fucking NASA.
Are we going Bumble
up there? So we're gonna go Bumble because the medical examiner story deserves way more time than what we have, and we're already over. And then we also have a PPP theft story that deserves more time.
Oh, it's Hugh Jackman.
So Hugh Jackman was arrested for rioting in the Capitol. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, Hugh Jackman. You're a great singer, actor.
We're actually
triple
drinking
threat.
aviation gin,
We
so
are
that would have
drinking
worked out very
aviation
well
gin.
to
That's true.
hammer Hugh Jackman.
I'm trying to get this.
Justice Department has charged a
Best
Capitol
produced
rioter who
podcast.
was turned in by someone he matched with on the dating app Bumble after he bragged about his exploits on January 6th. According to court documents, 1 week after the attack, Robert Chapman of New York told one of his Bumble matches, "I did storm the Capitol. I made it all the way into Statuary Hall." He also claimed that he was interviewed by members of the media. The Bumble user replied, "We are not a match."
Is Bumble the gay one?
No, Bumble is the one where the girls take the lead. The girls take the first lead, the first step.
Oh.
Yeah,
I
our
That's how
Bumble
I met
expert
Jess. I
has
met-
a Bumble. She's got a buzz.
Yeah, I actually have a date I have to go get like appropriate for. So
You got to go Bumble.
gotta go bum. Yeah.
Wow.
So,
And that's how you know you're not cool anymore.
right.
When your associate's like, "Bitch, it's Friday. I got a motherfucking date."
Yeah. Yeah. That's how you knew.
I mean, I've known all along.
Okay.
We're all.
I don't know. She looked at that guy's picture and was like, "I gotta go. That's him."
But she matched with him.
Bobby
I was like,
Chapman.
"Oh, I just forgot. I didn't remember."
She's like, "Shit." I
Did we get the
sideburns.
picture up?
Yeah, the picture was up. He looks like Wolverine from
Yeah, really?
from the X-Men
Or
movies.
Ted
Yeah.
Cruz.
And his
Or-
name is Jackman.
before Mexico?
No, his name is
Robert Chapman.
Robert
Oh,
Chapman.
I thought you said Jackman.
Isn't that the guy that killed? That's not the guy that killed Kennedy. Robert Chapman.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
No. The other Kennedy. Oh, that was Sirhan.
There's a lot of Kennedys.
I don't know. I feel like that's like some sort of serial killer.
It does
First
sound
of all,
like
if
an
he kills-
assassin.
Right.
No, he doesn't
No,
have.
there's no
he doesn't
middle
have three
name.
names.
Yeah,
Was
you
it
have
John
to have
Lennon?
a middle name.
Is the guy who killed Lennon?
Yes, it was the guy. It was Mark David Chapman.
David Chapman.
Mark David
Oh.
Chapman. See, I knew it. I got
It's his
some
brother.
history going there.
Probably.
Well, fuck it. He's
Probably
inside the
related.
Capitol.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. I don't know where I was going with that story. What do we think of the drink, fellas?
This did happen in Baltimore, though. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Somebody got
Capitol
turned in on a.
stormed.
No, we
I
had
did
City
not-
Hall get stormed a couple years ago, and they ordered them Domino's pizza. They handled this shit the right way when they were protesting
remember
the Johns
that.
Hopkins
I
police
remember
force
that.
coming in,
Oh,
or
yeah.
AKA
That was good.
Bloomberg's Bumble.
That's right. That's right.
I'm a big fan of Bumble. Had some success there. She's probably listening right now.
No
Back,
comment there.
like when I was dating, it was MySpace. You know, that's what we were doing.
You and Tom.
Me and Tom. I was like, Tom, hook me up, man. You know anybody on here?
I just would love. I can't imagine me having a business with my wife. So the funniest part about you is just me trying to imagine you operating a law firm, because I don't think any of the three of us could work with our wives. Now that we all don't love them, but you, my friend, do you wear pads? Do you put on a karate uniform in the morning? Like, I'm just trying to understand how that works at home. Do you have to make her breakfast? Who gets who coffee?
Do y'all drive in together?
Oh yeah.
They
So
drive.
many
They drive
questions.
from like the bedroom to the home office.
Oh yeah.
Right now,
Yeah.
at least.
Is it sexually harassment if it's if it's your wife?
We got to get HR and cocktails back
Exactly.
on for that one.
I need to call HR and cocktails. I'm not answering any of these questions.
I don't
I
blame you.
agree.
I don't
Not.
Do you need a lawyer, Robbie?
I am pleading the fifth on all of these.
As well, you should. That's
Gideon's a lawyer now. He can represent you.
He's a 3. He's like a 3L, rising 3L.
Yeah.
It's close enough.
Well, look, as we wrap this up, Robbie, and Kurt had created this, can you tell us your favorite story about being a lawyer? Favorite or funniest story?
Man, my favorite. Okay. Now that Megan Lewis is watching from the public defender's office on Facebook.
Nice.
Gideon said he had to leave at 5. I could tell the story until like 8 o'clock, but I'll give you the condensed version. So one day I meet a woman in the women's detention center for her bail review, and I start talking to her, and she's got this thick New York accent, African-American woman, sounds like she's from like Brooklyn, Queens, something like that. And I look at my paperwork and I'm like, you have an ICE detainer. That can't be right. Like, you're this woman from New York. She's 40-some years old, and she said, well, I was born in England and I came here when I was like 2 months old. And she had an ICE detainer. She was charged with tax fraud, something like that, and some similar related crimes. So first I'm thinking like, okay, I can't let her plead guilty and she can't be found guilty because she's going to be deported. And she's going to go back to England. She doesn't know anybody there. She's been here for 40 years.
I love it.
So she tells me this story and she's going on and on and on. It was like, there's no way you can believe anything that she's saying, right? I mean, it's like just crazy what she's
like
talking about.
everyone who I've ever represented for any serious financial crimes. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And so, but you're like, but I have to help because I can't let her get deported. So I'm going to go down the rabbit hole. Let's do this. Like, I'm going to follow every lead you give me. She had violated a probation in Montgomery County. And she's like, you have to go get my file from Montgomery County. They didn't help me. They didn't believe anything. Like, you believe me. Go down there. So I go down there. They had this unopened CD, this disc in the Montgomery County file, which the prosecutor had given them, which was all of her daytime talk show appearances. She was a member of SAG, the Screen Actors Guild, because of the amount of time she had been on like Maury Povich, Montel, Judge Joe Brown, like every show that you can think of. And it was this compilation CD. And
Greatest hits.
what her thing was like, she was a black woman, but would not identify herself as black. And she would talk about how she hates black people, mistrusts black people. And so that was like her thing. Okay. And so she was like famous for it. But
Of course she was, because there ain't a whole lot of people like that.
and she would talk about how she only likes gay black men and hates black women, but she is a black woman. It's this whole thing. And so it was part of her case file because she was charged in Montgomery County with harassing a black woman who she was having a sexual relationship with, who that woman was married to a man. They tell her she can't talk to or communicate with this woman anymore. No contact. So she meets a hooker through some app or some website. Okay?
Humble.
And promises this hooker, she says, I can arrange for you to have butt shots. Butt shots are injections, like collagen injections into your butt.
Presented this late.
Yeah.
I know this story.
See?
I remember this story.
I
Didn't we
remember
talk
this
about this on
story.
the
And
podcast?
so-
We did. We talked. This was like 3 or 4 years ago, maybe.
So this was
Or this is way
this
back
is
in
over
the
10
day.
years ago.
Oh,
So she-
Okay.
Different,
so she
different butt
she
Different
injections.
butt
says
injections.
I know a doctor who will give you butt shots in a hotel, right? Because it's against the law. He can't do it. So I'll set you up. So she meets with this hooker. She arranges all this. They develop this friendship while she's arranging these like
Butt shots.
hotel room butt shots. And she says, hey, by the way, I can't communicate with this woman who I have a no contact order with. Can you start calling her for me and like harassing her and all this stuff? And
Fair trade, by the way.
she goes,
fair trade.
Speaking of fair trade, the escort says, I can't pay for these butt shots. I don't have the money for it. And my client says, and this is all according to the police documents. Okay. She says, well, I can do your taxes for you. Okay. So she's like, I'll do your taxes. We'll send the refund to me and that'll pay for your butt shots. So the police investigate the violation of probation that she's harassing this woman. It goes back to the hooker. The hooker says, well, she told me to do it and I was going to give her my taxes to do it. And so the police then charge her with like tax fraud.
Which is actually, I'm not so sure. I think it's the only thing she didn't do wrong.
Yeah, I
If
was
she
gonna
had
say,
it
that
in
doesn't
writing.
sound like tax
Exactly.
fraud.
Right.
That was just tax preparation.
So
Is she a certified tax preparer though?
Yeah,
That's the
that's
big
so
one.
she also gets
Or
charged.
did she fraudulently certify her certification?
She also gets charged for harassing the escort because the escort said she sent all of the nude pictures of the escort to the escort's grandmother. Okay. And
Why not?
That's just fucked up.
so
Why not?
That's
I
revenge
told you the
porn.
story is like an hour long.
That's revenge porn.
So
I mean,
he-
this is the most convoluted thing I've ever heard.
So
You've
here's-
never met
so
Robbie.
here's-
Nothing
here's
simple
how-
with Robbie.
So like no one believed any of this stuff. Like no one believed any of these stories. They're like, this is all crazy. This is how I found out everything was true that my client was telling me and how everything was all like working together.
You got butt shots.
I went in, I'm like, give me the butt shots. And it was true. No. She said the escort who's claiming that I sent the grandmother nude pictures of her, she did it. She consented to it. And her boyfriend is in jail for murder. And like they have phone calls all the time. Just try to get their phone calls, their recorded conversations. So I subpoenaed I subpoenaed the what's the one on the Eastern Shore, like
ECI.
ECI. Okay. I drive all the way out there. I spend like the summer driving back and forth to Ocean City, listening to like hours and hours, like days worth of phone calls from all the time that he's in prison for murder with this girl. I'm like, I'm going to drive back and forth to Ocean City, 3 hours there, 3 hours back. And finally I hear like they're having phone sex. It's like, I'm listening to phone sex, not a bad way to drive to Ocean
Butt
City.
shots.
And I hear the guy who's in jail saying, like, hey, send me some more pictures of you, those nude ones. And she goes, I got to wait until my grandmother gets home to take them for me. And so,
What?
and I'm like, oh my God, my client didn't mail nude pictures to the escort's grandmom. The grandmom's taking the pictures.
And this is part of your defense to tax fraud.
So this is part of my defense to tax fraud to show that she's lying, that she consented to my client doing her taxes for her. So fast forward, I go to court and I go to the state's attorney and I'm like, you'll never believe this CD that I have of what she says. And he's like, I don't care. We're going forward.
Is this in the city?
This is in the city.
Who's
This-
the prosecutor? You
This
gotta
is
tell me who the
this is in
prosecutor
district court
Of course it is. You didn't know that this story was. This screams district court.
It's in front.
I could guess
It's
the
in
fucking
district
courtroom.
And it was at Wabash, and the prosecutor's like, "We're trying it," and I'm like, "But I'm gonna win." And he's like, "Here are the bank records that show that your client deposited the tax refund in her bank account." And I'm like, "Well, you didn't give me the custodian of records letter 10 days before the
Where's
trial
the bank
date."
rep?
So I go in front of the judge. I'm like, "I'm just going to make a motion to dismiss, a motion to exclude these bank records, and then they don't have a case to show that my client got the money." And the judge called me up to the bench, and he's like, "Mr. Leonard, you're a young lawyer. You're going to have to make a decision today on what kind of lawyer you want to be. Do you want to get along with the state's attorney and have them want to work with you? Because I'm looking at the rule, and I think you're right, but like the state's attorney might be upset that the case is going to be dismissed."
That matters.
Come on,
Because
say
that
the
matters.
judge's name.
I won't. But I'm like, I'm going to tell you what kind of reputation I'm going to have.
It's so easy to guess. I'm going to bet $20 right now that I guess it after the episode.
Don't say it. And I just said, and my reputation is going to be that the state's attorneys are going to come prepared for their cases. Thank you for the dismissal. And he dismissed it. And
then
I
did she
drove my
say?
client to the
And then
bus
what did
stop,
say?
and she went
What did the
somewhere.
judge say? What did she say?
It wasn't a she. It wasn't a she.
Oh, I'm already wrong. Yeah.
See that? So she was found not guilty, didn't get deported, and
Yeah, well, that you know of.
that I know
For that
of.
reason. For that reason.
Can we
I
all
know.
agree that if she actually had a British accent, he would have taken her story more seriously? Because a British accent would have bought credibility. So, like, I was getting butt shots, right? And then I met some Lou on on Craigslist, and then thought like, what a better way to do this than like take your tax money and then meet you in a place and give you butt shots, and then send my
But then a
grandmother
grandmum.
nudes. Yeah, exactly. Like, there's so much more credibility to that with an English accent,
It's
obviously.
so crazy.
Thanks everybody for jumping in and listening to us. I'm trying to follow I'm trying to follow everything going on. So really appreciate you coming on. I know Gideon's about to unplug his computer. He's got to go.
Thank you for
So,
joining us, Robbie.
thanks for
Next time
joining
on
us.
Butt Shots on Lawyers on the Rocks, produced by Gideon Breedenham and Big Judy, Kurt Knockman, Adam Crandall doing whatever
Why'd you
immigration
slip into,
lawyers
you
do.
slipped into Australia?
I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. It's this damn limoncello. But thank
Yeah.
you for joining us,
It's a good
Robbie.
drink.
Yeah, thanks.
Love
for
to have
having
you
me,
on
guys.
again in the
Choice.
future.
It's fun.
Sit back, relax, pour yourself a drink. Till the next time.
Lawyers on the Rocks.